Kiki's delivery service is an anomaly in regards to Miyazaki movies. While it might share narrative aspects and character arcs to other Miyazaki films, such as Spirited Away and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, the film is also really different for Miyazaki specifically. It's the only film of his, besides Castle of Cagliostro and Hayao's Moving Castle, to be an adaptation of an existing work that was not created by Miyazaki, such is the case for Nausicaa and Porco Rosso. It's also only one of 2 films by Miyazaki in which he wasn't intended to be the original director. Instead, in this corner of the world's director, Sunao Katabuchi was to direct Kiki, whilst Mamoru Hosoda was to direct Hayao's Moving Castle, and what I would give to see either final versions of. Miyazaki's delivery service is well received critically, but it's not held as highly as his other works. Whilst being critically acclaimed on MAL with an 8.29, putting it within the top 300 highest rated anime and the top 400 most popular anime, the film is Miyazaki's 5th lowest scored amongst his other works on the same site. Comparing Kiki to his 2 most acclaimed works, Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, it becomes even more confusing as to why Kiki isn't as high as either of them, let alone why Kiki is below Laputa, Nausicaa and Totoro. Kiki's delivery service does contain a much simpler story than those previously listed, but deep within the cells of Kiki is something deeper than the coming of age story, a comment on animators within Japan, and for a community that struggles to get concrete information about the industry that the community is built upon, the observations and comments within Kiki's delivery service make it without question the best Miyazaki movie, among other reasons, as well as ripe for re-evaluation. Sources can be found in the description. The first aspect that must be brought up is Kiki herself, or at least how Miyazaki sees Kiki as a representation. Beyond Kiki being a representation of all girls watching the film, Kiki herself, particularly within the narrative, is representative of young female animators within Japan's animation industry. To quote Miyazaki himself from the Kiki's Delivery Service art book, "I got all the gestures for the girls and Kiki by observing the new female animators I was training." End quote. It's also noted that within the art book, that Miyazaki based his film concept on the resemblance he saw between the heroine of Kiki's Delivery Service and the young woman animators at the studio. They all shared the dilemmas of young women experienced in the city. End quote. And Miyazaki's vision in his films is never done haphazardly. The creation is planned extensively. As Miyazaki says, "When I make a film, I begin by having a very clear concept of why I have to make it in the first place. What kind of film will it be? What is going to be conveyed? What is our purpose in making this film? Will the audience accept it?" And in making a film that is aimed at the young women of Japan, as well as the young animators of Japan, he hits the nail on the head. One aspect of Kiki's Delivery Service that is mentioned by his right-hand woman in the 2013 documentary, The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, is Kiki's portrayal of emotions. She notes, "Kiki's emotions felt so real." And she wasn't the only person who felt a relationship with Kiki's dialogue and performance. Kiki's Japanese voice actor, Minami Takayama, is said by Miyazaki to have claimed that she could relate to Kiki's feelings. The aspect of Kiki's dialogue that lends it to being so vastly understood amongst its target audience, when Miyazaki is probably the furthest thing away from it, is the bluntness of it. As Miyazaki puts in the art book, while she might be blunt towards boys her age, she's respectful towards her seniors, particularly if she admires them. And while Miyazaki is clearly shown to have drawn from his right-hand woman as well as the animators of his studio, Miyazaki doesn't shy away from including aspects of himself into the film, primarily through the character of Ursula. Ursula acts an opposite to Kiki. Even though they are both voice acted by the same woman, Kiki's artistry is her flight and witch abilities, whereas Ursula is a more traditionally understood artist. As Jonathan Ellis describes in his article, The Art of Anime, Freeze Frames and Moving Pictures in Miyazaki Hayao's Kiki's Delivery Service, Ursula, on the other hand, represents a less instinctive artistry. She prepares to paint by first drawing and sketching, even when she reveals her painting of Kiki towards the end of the film. It's still a work in progress. She's the type of artist who redrafts and revises rather than painting or writing impulsively. Miyazaki's reputation suggests that he probably sees himself as more of an Ursula than a Kiki. Miyazaki's own comments about Ursula add additional evidence to this reading of Ursula, not as a self-insert, but as holding similar ideals and aspects to Miyazaki himself. To quote Miyazaki, "I really like Ursula." In The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, Miyazaki is cited as spending time away in a mountain cabin as being the inspiration for creating Spirited Away, whilst Ursula also spends her entire life within her cabin. The cabin's design also harkened to Miyazaki's own house, which is very wooden and cabin-like as opposed to a more modern Japanese house. The studio in which Miyazaki makes The Wind Rises is also covered in vines and other types of environments, such as comparable to a cabin in the wood. This is made even more evident when we see what the studio that Takahata makes The Tale of Princess Kaguya in compared to Miyazaki's studio. Miyazaki also harbors a lot of Ursula's more caring attitudes. In regards to Ursula's paintings, Miyazaki said he was looking forward to drawing them himself at one point. Ultimately with Ursula, Miyazaki is trying to capture that mentor aspect, especially when Kiki starts facing greater emotional issues in her journey. Miyazaki said that Ursula wants to be Kiki's role model when she sees how dispirited Kiki is. As Miyazaki wanted to show the struggle of not being appreciated for having an amazing skill, he stated that he wanted the magic in the film to be a limited unlimited talent, and that he thought the girls watching this would understand the film on its own terms. At first, she attracts attention in the city, but her flying ability turns out to be no big deal for the inhabitants. I really worked on making this premise convincing. She thought she'd be appreciated, but that's not how the real world works. What Kiki really needs right now is a supportive friend who'll visit her and understand her dilemmas. Meeting someone like that is more important than her vacation status. Miyazaki's understanding of the female animator's plight has allowed him to capture emotions seldom found in his other films. Whilst Kiki is a straightforward coming-of-age story, the accuracy and care put into the message sent to the audience is surprisingly effective, to which Miyazaki crafts a deeper emotional understanding of an industry than any numbers report could have. I've been Kazimoto. Subscribe and follow me on Twitter, as well as share if you've enjoyed this video. Adios.